You are listening to Leaders and Legends, a podcast produced by Veteran Strategies and featuring conversations with fascinating and impactful men and women who have shaped our world, our communities, and our history. My name is Robert Vane, Principal of Veteran Strategies, and your host for our discussion. You are listening to Leaders and Legends, a podcast presented by Veteran Strategies, an Indiana-based public relations enterprise, and sponsored by Garmon Construction, Leaders and Legends LLC, the Grand Hall and Conference Center at Historic Union Station, the McGinley's Golden Ace Inn, and NFP, a national insurance broker with strong local content. Our podcast is featured on the All Indiana Podcast Network in partnership with Wish TV. You may find Leaders and Legends at allindianapodcastnetwork.com. Thinking of starting a podcast or need to host a public meeting? Let Leaders and Legends LLC be your partner as you look for new ways to communicate your message. Please contact Chris Spangle or me at leadersandlegends.net. And as always, all our podcast interviews are dedicated to the legacy and generosity of P.E. McAllister. Thank you for joining us on the Leaders and Legends podcast. Our guest today is Dan Ridenour. You know him as the current mayor of Muncie, Indiana. He's currently serving his second term, but he has a wonderful backstory. Going to have to ask him a lot of questions about the Pacers.
Oh, good.
And how he transferred's not the word, but how he moved from the private sector into the public sector. His background is finance. And with everything that's going on, state and local government, plus national, with the Department of Government Efficiency, your timing's perfect. Thank you, Mayor, for being a guest on the Leaders and Legends podcast.
It is my pleasure.
Well, as painful as this is, I have to say, I'm very grateful to Matt Organ, our shared friend.
Yes.
Who's a wonderful guy, a terrific, hardworking activist who called me up out of the blue and said, "Hey, will you please interview my friend?" And I jumped at the chance, and I'm grateful for your time. And Matt, thank you very much, and good luck in Virginia. How did you meet Matt?
Ball State College Republicans.
You were speaking to?
I was there, and he was at an event that they had, and that was where I first came across him. And he actually knocked on some doors for me in one of my campaigns. Yeah,
he's hardworking.
He is very hard.
It's one of his many positive reputations in the political world is how he gets. He's not up in the ivory tower.
No, he'll get down and dirty if need be.
Where did you go to college?
Ooey Pooey, but nobody calls it that anymore. But
because there's no Pooey.
That's right. There's no Pooey. What's interesting is my brother and I both, one of my brothers and I both attended there, and I was on the IU, the business administration side, and he became an engineer for Purdue. Purdue.
You've been struggling the last several years.
Oh, yeah.
Well, the Oaken Bucket game worked out.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Where were you born?
I was born in Indianapolis at St. Francis Hospital, in a location that is no longer the hospital, so in the Beech Grove location. And and that's coincidentally, that is where my mother was born, my grandmother was born, and my great-grandmother was born. So they were all Southsiders, and we're in this area, actually. In fact, my mother worked at G.C. Murphy right here, right on Virginia Avenue when it was here, back when she was in high school.
Did you go to high school in Indianapolis?
No, my dad was a pastor, a minister, and as he moved around,
Sure.
We moved around. So I've lived in Indianapolis, Greenwood, Danville, for part of my school years, and then Frankfort. I was actually a Frankfort hot dog in high school. So that's... But I always tell my wife it's a ferocious looking hot dog. It has quite the growl.
Does your wife ever call you Steve by accident?
No.
Steve McQueen?
No, she does not.
Who was famously born in the St. Francis Beech Grove Hospital.
There you go.
My mother worked there
Really?
for decades.
Really?
Yeah, she did. Post Mr. McQueen and probably pre you, but yeah, she worked there for a long time. It's kind of weird when you drive by and it's no longer there.
I know. Yeah.
It is not the easiest thing in the world to migrate from business to politics. So I'm going to guess, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the political world was something you followed or were interested in perhaps as a kid or a teenager. Is that fair?
That would be fair. That would be fair. We, in high school, I got involved in a campaign. Um, it was, I guess it would have been 76. Um, and we did some door knocking and passed out flyers, and we started a teenage Republican group. But I really went years without participating much at all. But that was Ford. That was Gerald Ford and Carter.
In 76?
I believe so. Yeah.
Well, he won the state even though he lost
He
the
did.
election.
He did. Yes.
What is your first political memory? We're not the same age. I think I'm about 8 or 9 years. I was born in 67. I'm about 8 or 9 years younger than you.
Yeah, that'd be about right.
So you can remember things like the assassinations perhaps in 68?
You know, I remember parts of that. I mostly remember my mother crying, yeah, and being upset. So I honestly don't remember.
Like can't really separate the two.
But I remember her being very upset and not really understanding what it was all about. And she didn't really want to talk about it.
Sure. Do you remember the 68 election?
I do not.
So the big thing after that would be obviously you would have some Vietnam sort of like television.
There would have been also Walking on the Moon. That was
correct
in 69.
Mm-hmm.
In 69, and I know the family was all around the little black and white TV. I mean, there was probably a 25-inch screen, but that's small today. But
That's
it was
right.
black and white, and I remember watching that. And but that's something I remember in 69.
Next big event after that would probably be Kent State, which is May of 70. We did a podcast with a historian who wrote a beautiful book on Kent State. So much was happening in the early 70s, late 60s, much of it categorized as counterculture, for lack of a better term.
Mm-hmm.
I'm lucky enough to come of age, really, when Reagan was president, Ronald Reagan. Is there something that pushed you in one party philosophy direction as opposed to the other?
I think I was always most interested in being in business. And that certainly was more of a Republican value, to be someone who was, I don't want to say pro-business, but I wanted personally to be in the business world. So I think that was what drove me to the Republican side of things.
Like Chamber of Commerce sort of thing, you automatically were...
Yeah, I had an interest in, I had a number of rental property. You know, as a young adult,
Sure.
I acquired a lot of properties. I had a small part-time vending business. I call it small. I mean, there were 600. I had 600 different gum machines throughout the city. I know.
Can I get my refund?
Yeah, I know, really. At times, maybe, if you
Those
catch me there.
didn't work most of the time.
So, but I was always interested in that side of things. How do you take an old bike, fix it up, and sell it for more than it cost you to fix it? So I always had a capitalist side to me, and that was far more Republican than Democrat.
Especially at the time, it would have been considered for sure. And how did your preacher father feel about your, I'm not going to say false god of capitalism, but your drive? Like this is how I'm going to make money and provide for my family, and because they don't always seem to match.
It doesn't always match. It's really interesting. My mother is a super conservative, strong Republican, and my father was a member in his later years. So when I was having kids, was a pretty active member in the Green Party. So I had quite the diverse background.
And not to get too far off topic, that's obviously fascinating. Was it sort of the God gave man stewardship of the earth sort of thing that he
That was
reached
very
for?
much it. He had a very big heart as well, and but he certainly wanted to do. I mean, he drove a Prius before they were popular, and was very much into the environment and how to protect it.
And your mother said, "Get a
That's
job, hippie."
well, we won't go into all of that, but yeah. So I really appreciated that type of background to where kind of I could hear both sides, and what I appreciated about both of them is you could say what I could say what I thought. They could say what they thought, and there was still love and communication. Some of the things that I think is missing this day and age,
Right.
especially in Washington. I mean, you're sworn enemies nowadays, it appears, and uh, I can remember the times where you would hear stories of Reagan and Tip O'Neill arguing about issues in person and then on the stage, so to speak, of Congress, but then going to dinner that night. And that seems to be a little lost in Washington.
You're listening to the Leaders and Legends podcast. Our guest today is the current mayor of Muncie, Indiana, Dan Ridenour. We're discussing his early political activity and beliefs. And as we migrate into business, now you went to IUPUI.
Ooey pooey, I still like to call it. Nobody
Well,
knows what I'm talking about these days. But
back then it was my degrees were both one was in the mid 90s, the other was late 90s. And IUPUI was starting to, you know, become something perhaps maybe even different than what it was intended to be when in 30 years before then. But when you went, it was a true commuter
oh, it
campus for
was.
people who work during the day,
It was.
and the amenities probably weren't even
Hey,
amenities.
Kavanaugh Hall is still there, which is where that was the main building at the time. But yeah,
That's where most of my classes
yeah,
were, history and political science.
So
So when was the last time you drove through IUPUI
it has
or IU Indy now?
at least 4 or 5 years.
It's remarkable how much it's changed for the
Yeah,
better.
I will need to do that. It'd be fun to see and interesting to see how it's transformed.
Well, Pamela Whitten, the president of Indiana University, is a good friend of the podcast. I am
Ah,
happy to reach out to her and make the connections for you to get the first class tour. My kids are both there now. My daughter's a comms major, and my son's in his second year of law school. And it's really something to be proud of, in the sense that while they're separate now, IU and Purdue really made that work.
yeah, they did.
Did you ever think about going someplace else, or do you ever wish you
No,
had?
no. I mean, I had a an offer for a partial scholarship to Wabash College for football. Um, I wish I had taken it because the team was very good when I would have been in college, and I think even won a national championship. But it wasn't a full ride, and we were not positioned financially, and we're kind of averse to debt.
Sure.
And so IUPUI fit well, but I would have loved to have been a part of a team that had that type of success.
When would you have graduated from Wabash?
In 82, 82 or 83, in that range.
And so, as a Republican, is it an advantage that you could have gone to Wabash and said no, or is it a disadvantage that you didn't go and meet everybody?
Well, and I appreciate you're asking these questions. That is not something I've really shared with a lot of people. I remember being offered this guy, but I don't think I've ever talked about having the opportunity. I mean, I had the grades to go there. I think I was ranked 13th in my class of 255. So I was in that. I would have qualified to go there, but it financially was never in my realm.
So, nobody who are friends of both the podcast and of Hoosier, such as Mike Braun or Mark Miles or David Brooks or Bob Grand, those folks, are they aware of this?
I don't believe that most people are. No.
We like to break news
You
on the
did.
Leaders and
You
Legends
did.
podcast. You talked about some of your entrepreneurial endeavors as a kid or younger, young adult.
Mhm.
As you started to get older, what made you focus on banking, finance, that area?
I had there was a gentleman named Bert Weaver who worked for. He was in Frankfort, Indiana, where I was. He lived in Frankfort, Indiana, but Bert was employed by Merchants Bank with the green uh, briefcases at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And he talked to me, and I liked what he told me about banking. He was an officer with them, and uh, I kind of took it from there.
I'm going to jump ahead to something that I wanted to bring up later because I just want to make sure that that I don't lose the opportunity to talk to an expert, quite frankly.
Okay.
And that's you. It's 2025. Fiscal responsibility, budgets are certainly in related topics are top of mind. You run Muncie. It's a significant city,
Mm-hmm.
famous for several things, Ball State University obviously being near the top of the list. As you pay attention to what's coming out of the State House with regard to property taxes, how do you both remain fiscally conservative, which I'm going to anoint you? It's not tar you, it's anoint you with that title,
Okay.
with that description. Be mindful of the monies it takes to run a city and be politically astute. It's not easy. I was deputy chief of staff for Mayor Greg Ballard in Indianapolis. It's not easy. How are you sort of walking those tight ropes?
Um, you are correct. It is not easy. I know our budgets are considerably less than the city of Indianapolis, but we also, unlike Indianapolis, we've not had the growth spurts that have occurred over the years through several administrations. From Hudnut all the way even up to Ballard. Uh, Muncie was a booming community at one time. I didn't live there at the time, uh, and had several automotive plants and plenty of tax revenues. And so I don't think they had as much of a concern as I do now with the revenues. We've been very careful. We made a lot of financial decisions in my first year, and we've worked hard to come up with strategies that help us increase the revenues without increasing the tax rates. So, and what I mean by that, and this is so difficult to explain, you would understand it, but often for the public, it just doesn't make sense. How this could work, but we have been very careful to put things together in a way to where we are paying cash and not borrowing. Uh, that doesn't mean we haven't borrowed at all, but for developments, we have not borrowed and we've not added anything to a TIF district. So
That's tax increment
which is
financing.
tax increment financing district, and this was very intentional because our growth rate as a city has been negative, and that means your tax base often is reducing. So to have several developments that we've done, and we've had some, uh, our tax revenues, property tax revenues, even though the Muncie MSA
Mm-hmm.
has gone up, which after 50 years of decline has gone up 412 through the census estimates through 2023. The 2024
And that's
will
the
be out.
metropolitan statistical area.
Yes. So the Muncie MSA is up 412 after 50 years of decline, which I'm proud of. And I played a part in, but I can't live with declining revenue. So we had to make the decision that we were going to try and do less projects, do them for cash, our input would be cash to do infrastructure. That's the
Sure.
type of thing that we do. And our tax revenues have gone from 14.6 million my first year to 18.3 this past year. And I know a big part of that is by not putting it in a tax increment finance district, a TIF district. That means it's going to the general fund and also benefits our school system. So we've been very careful with that. It's caused increased revenues, which has allowed me to increase the pay for police and fire substantially because we do a lot. Muncie is one of the highest number of runs per firefighter and runs per EMS department in the state. And
is Muncie's different than the county?
Yes.
Here in Indianapolis, obviously, we're so
You're
used to
all
Unigov and being a
yes.
consolidated city, the only consolidated city in Indiana.
Yes.
A lot of folks, sometimes, myself included, don't differentiate between, well, the county does this, but then the city does that.
Yeah, we operate separately. So inside the city limits is where we've focused our efforts. But we feel like we've had some good success. We've added some additional housing options. One of the things that we did in 2020, we added what was called White River Lofts. It's a 55-unit market rent apartment building downtown along the river, and it's about 2 blocks from City Hall. I can see it from my office window. And of the 55 people that moved into that particular unit, which has been 100% occupied since it opened in 2021, 39 of the 55 were people who already worked at Muncie, primarily at Ball State. Some worked at the hospital, but they weren't living in Muncie. They were driving over from Hamilton County. That proved to us that if we have more housing options, because all of our local developers died financially and went out of business in the 2007, 2008 real estate crisis. So we didn't have anybody building new homes, which creates decades of negative growth.
You actually led me right into my next question, and that is, it's the importance of the debate now is about property taxes.
Yes, it is.
And I want to ask you about that. In 2024, I did the public relations, the PR for Suzanne Crouch's run for governor.
Okay.
For the Republican nomination, she finished second to Mike Braun, the current governor, and we proposed an eventual elimination of the income tax. The income tax doesn't get the attention, in my view, that it deserves, meaning that so much of what is funded in a city comes from having a whole lot of people living in the city who make money.
Make money.
Good money.
Yes.
How does the income tax affect you as a mayor? You just mentioned those folks used to live in Hamilton County. Now they live in your city. How much of a difference does that make for you when you are trying to hire cops, fix the parks, maybe, build that pretty project that some people want and some people don't want?
Yeah. Oh, it's very dramatic. So I wish I knew our percentage off the top of my head, but we've got our income tax revenues, our average income that comes out from HUD every year. That average income has grown substantially with the addition of people who are moving to our community. And we're pretty aggressive in some other areas. We're one of the early adopters of the Make My Move program, which recruits remote workers. We've now had just under 200 people move to Muncie who work somewhere else, but they work remote. And they're really enjoying the slower paced life and the prices and the values that they receive in Muncie. And because Muncie is a great sized city at 65,000 people, it's a perfect place to be, in my opinion. It's the perfect place to be because everything you need is within 10 minutes. Now, not everything you want. Like tonight, for example, I'm going to the Indiana Pacer game. I'm a season ticket holder. But so tonight I will be
for 43 years.
for 43 years. And tonight
get
they
to
play the evil New York Knicks. They're not the New York Knicks. They're the evil New York Knicks. So, but in an hour, I can be in Indianapolis, but I don't have to deal with 465 every day, and the traffic issues every day. So, Muncie is a wonderful community, and the other part of it, and what we sell most in the recruitment world, where we're trying to recruit remote workers, is the fact that Ball State University, a 21,000 student university, so a major Division I university, is in our community, and that gives people comfort. We've had a lot of people move from the Pittsburgh and Philadelphia. We've had a lot of people move from California, and the West Coast. So they want to be in and around things that are exciting. We don't exactly have mountains
Sure.
or those types of things, but we have a great lifestyle. It's a little slower paced, and you can get anywhere in 10 minutes.
You mentioned people moving.
Mhm.
Mitch Daniels, who's been on the podcast multiple times, we're very grateful to him. When he first became governor, talked about this in a way that I hadn't really thought of, because I just was starting out in politics and didn't really understand certainly the fiscal part, the sort of strategic planning that goes into place for a city or town or a state. And that is, you go to school here, we want you to stay here. You have Ball State, which is known for several fantastic programs. I would say architecture.
Architecture,
It'd be the
absolutely.
number one frame of reference
Teaching.
for Indianapolis.
Mhm.
Teaching,
Mhm.
obviously. Our good friend Danielle Shockey. Do you know Danielle?
Yeah.
Used to be a co-host of the podcast.
Okay.
Proud Ball State Cardinal,
Chirp,
former
chirp.
teacher. Yeah, it's the first thing she says to me every day. I'm like, where are my cookies? I don't want to hear that. She talked a lot about that. So how do you get people to stay in Muncie or the surrounding area, but preferably Muncie, who come out of Ball State?
Yeah.
And how do you two work together as entities, Ball State and you and the city?
Yeah. So, and it's a great question. It's been something that we've been very clear in our desire to work together. Both President Mearns at Ball State and myself. So we get together on at least a monthly basis. He's a runner. I'm a runner. We often pass on the Greenway as he's running. He's a morning runner like I am. But we've done several, we'll just call them developments in partnership. So a lot of public-private partnerships where we've brought in some developers. He's brought in developers, and then we help fund some of the infrastructure. And mostly it's around housing and kind of upbeat, building up the village, which is the area just south, right by Ball State, where there's a lot of restaurants and other facilities that students love to go to and have fun. But we're adding some housing into that area. We're adding a new hotel into that area, and all of those are collaborations. We worked with Ball State when we put together our Make My Move program,
Mm-hmm.
and Ball State does offer access to the Bracken Library at the Ball State campus, some tickets to some games, and their health facility as well. So those are some of the benefits that we provide to people who move to the community. Those are just a couple of the areas. Ball State recently deeded us 12 acres for us to help build a subdivision. We build a subdivision, and then we're able to sell all the lots to a builder. So they like that. They want their professors to live locally as opposed to living outside the county. And so they provided me with 12 acres, which we just were able to annex and are now in the process of working on putting together another subdivision to help have their staff, their employees work and live in the same community. So we've had a really good relationship. I greatly appreciate President Mearns and the whole Ball State team. We understand that for us to recruit people to live here, Ball State is important, and Ball State understands for their recruitment for both students and for faculty, Muncie has to grow and be better as well. So we've got a nice relationship.
You mentioned trails, which have become in the last decade or so sort of the hot amenity in cities. The Monon here in Indianapolis that goes all the way past Westfield, I think now.
Yeah, I believe so.
I also have the Cultural Trail not far from where we're sitting here in Fountain Square that goes throughout Indianapolis. It's a beautiful amenity. When you talk to young people and in your surveys, what are I'm 25, I'm 28, I've got an architecture degree. I can pretty much go anywhere I want. What's keeping young people in a city like yours or attracting them to a city like yours?
Yeah, I think we tend to try and know what our market is. And so when you've got somebody, we would love to have all architecture students stay in the Muncie community. So I don't want this to be taken the wrong way. However, we understand that those who are maybe from a large city may prefer to go to a large city. But those who want to be architects who are from communities of Muncie size or less will often be drawn to our community. We've got a company, local company called Flatland Resources, was started by a Ball State graduate, now has maybe 8 to 10 employees, and every single one of them, none of them were from the community. They were all Ball State grads who stay, and we're doing a number of projects with them currently, and they're very engaged in the community. So that's just one example. But, we know we're not going to get everybody, but we do make a concerted effort to try and come up with things that a 25-year-old, I can try and remember back to those days, what a 25-year-old would be looking for. And so we've got some downtown apartments going up and along the river and the trails on both sides of the river, and we certainly tout those things. And then we always point out just right over there, see those buildings, that's Ball State. And that's how we recruit. Ball State is how we recruit.
We talked a few minutes ago about property taxes, and I wanted to make sure that I mentioned income taxes because of how cities are funded. How do you, as a mayor, I'm going to use the word compete. That's not the right word, so forgive me, because I don't want it to seem to be, well, maybe some benevolent competition with Carmel, with Noblesville, with Fishers, because you're just a little bit farther away. And how much do you, as a mayor, look at what my former coworker, Mr. Jensen, Mayor Jensen, is doing in Noblesville and go, we need to do that, or we need to do what Sue Finkham is doing in Carmel, and the list goes on.
Yeah, no, Chris and I get together for lunch on a regular basis. We both took office the same year. Luckily for him, he had no opponent. I had opponents in both the primary and in the general. But we know that we don't have. How do I put this? We know that we are what we are, and we understand we're not metropolitan. But we also know that we have some value in it. So we seek those who are seeking our type of lifestyle, which is just a little slower. But I do jokingly, and I've told Chris this, and I told Scott Fadness this. If I could do anything, if I had my wish list, I would build a toll road from exit 210 to Muncie to make it costly for people to drive back and forth. But
you have Ball State,
Interstate 69,
and they don't have that.
No, they do not. I know, and they would love that type of opportunity. So that's why we understand we've got value, and I understand they have great value as well. What I appreciated was one of the things I learned from Noblesville, and it was before Chris, but the building of 146th Street. And Mitch Daniels, I think, said this once in a speech when I was attending an event. But he said, you build the roads. The roads are the key. And when they built 146th across Hamilton County, there was nothing there. Very little was there. And now it's booming with all types of opportunities, from residential to commercial to warehousing to sport complexes. Uh, the roads are such an important piece, and we did notice that. So we looked at, and this is a different example, but we noticed that the GPS always sent people up our to Muncie, who were coming from Indianapolis. If they weren't going to Ball State, but they were going downtown to our convention center or to City Hall, it sent people up Hoyt Avenue. Well, Hoyt Avenue was the old 67, but there's a bypass that goes around. Well, GPS sends them up Hoyt Avenue. Well, the road was poorly maintained. We'll call it that.
Sure.
And so we've spent a lot of funds and resources, because that's how GPS sends people up. It's not through an area that had a lot of development. And so we've purposely been doing development, and we did the entire road in 2 different sections, all the way from the bypass up to downtown, because when people are coming in, we want them to have a positive viewpoint. But I think of that often because 146 was built before the development, and I needed a pretty entrance into the city, a better looking entrance into the city. And GPS took people off. GPS has taken people off the highways and put them on back roads if that's the best way to get to
Exactly.
a town. And so we felt like we needed to address that. So we've spent millions of dollars along Hoyt Avenue to try and make it more appealing.
Do you plan to testify at any point about property taxes to the State House, the General Assembly session this year?
I am not this year. I have in previous years, but there are so many people who I feel like will have the influence that we need. I think we've got it covered through AIM. I think we've got it covered pretty well, and I understand there's been some
terrific organization.
Amendments also have been presented now to SB1, so that's good news for us.
What is the balance?
So the way SB1 is written right now, what it would cost us is $2.4 million in the first year, and about $3 million in following years. That's devastating. When you go from 18.3 million and you lose 2.4 of it, that's not something we can easily handle. In fact, we've worked the numbers, and I finally told the team, I said, let's just not work these anymore. Let's see how it ends up. It's wasted energy.
But the argument always is, you can find it. There's not
$2.4 million that we can find. And I know Delaware County will lose 3.1 under SB1, and Muncie schools in particular will lose 1.2. And these are just the first year losses. And I think Yorktown School, about 3,000 people that live in the Muncie city limits are in the Yorktown School District. They lose just under $1 million. And that's sizable. That's minimal compared to what I'm told by Chris Jensen from Noblesville is Hamilton Southeastern is losing.
Oh, yeah. Did I sound that was I Rob Kindling there? That's sufficient amount of. We love Rob Kindle on the podcast. He's a good man, and he's fighting this fight on property taxes from his pulpit in the media. Is there an argument for you own your home or you're 65 years old or whatever, and you're still paying property taxes on it? So that's the balance.
I know.
You don't want people losing their homes or standard of living becoming so diminished, not because they bought, a garage mahal for $500,000 that they couldn't afford, but we're going to stay within our means, spend $200,000, live in a nice neighborhood, but the damn property taxes went from X to X plus Y and then Y plus Z. How do you, as someone who's an expert in finance, I am not, so none of these questions are adversarial, or candidly, they don't come from a basis of a foundation of knowledge. All I know about is my own property tax bill, which went up considerably this year. How do you say, look, you want nice parks and you want to feel safe and you want to have a fire truck come to you within 5 minutes? These are the things we need. But at the same time, we understand that with rising inflation and other pressures, pocketbooks can get pinched.
Well,
And the fear of losing your home is one of the absolute most debilitating there is.
Yeah, no, I think it's a legitimate concern, and I do know that the state receives zero property tax revenues, and the most frustrating part to us as mayors is that we're not talking about total tax reform to help the citizens save money. We're talking about tax reform geared toward municipalities and schools, which is property taxes. And that it didn't feel like everybody had skin in the game in this cut. We know we would not be able to perform services at the same level and would have to do staffing cuts if this went through, if SB1 goes through in its original form. Our expectation is that's not going to be the case. It just would be nice if there was some type of way to make up some of those revenues. So the citizens who might save, and I'll just give you an example because this was an example that was shared with me. Somebody, it was figured up, they're paying $4,500 a year in taxes. If SB1 passed, they would only be paying $2,000. That would be wonderful. And I would love for my taxes to go down. But what I said to a legislator last week is there is zero chance that resident who is now saving $2,500 is going to say, but please don't maintain the parks anymore because I'm saving $2,500 and I know you guys are working hard. That is not going to come across, and nobody's going to say that. So I would like to see some type of reform or other method to where the revenues are not impacting two areas, which is local government and schools only. And
because the schools can do the referenda,
they can.
The cities.
And the cities can as well. Here's the challenge with SB1, in my opinion. I really hate to get into this too deep because I want to keep friends. But the challenge with SB1, in my opinion, is that we're providing tax relief for homeowners. We're not providing tax relief for renters because it only affects those with a homestead. The renters are not going to see any decrease in property taxes because they're paying them. They're just paying them through their rent, but the landlords are not receiving a decrease. So there's no way it's going to be shared, and commercial properties are not decreasing. So we're helping the homeowners. It has been shared with me that we should just raise our lit tax, which in Delaware County we could do. We're nowhere near the max.
And that's the local income.
That's the local income tax. Yeah, you're good reminding me. I stop using to explain what it is. That's good. But that lit tax then taxes the renters who did not get a decrease for something that the homeowners got. And so I just don't think that this was thought out completely.
Spangle, does this sound like my spin for Crouch's campaign? To get rid of the income tax because it helps everybody.
There you go. That's one of my concerns. My other concern is it's only impacting the locals and the schools.
Governor Braun has made it clear he wants to listen to folks. Have you had a chance to we're not going to ask you about a private conversation, but do you have a chance to talk to him, not only from a position of the mayor of Muncie, but also decades of experience in finance, public and private?
I've not had a private conversation with him, although in a forum that was held by our Chamber of Commerce in Muncie during the primary, he did attend that. And I did ask the question. It was the very first question asked. And I said who I was. And I knew him from Senate days.
Sure.
But I said, how is there a formula that will protect the cities so that we can still provide the services? In other words, is this shared some way with the state or other agencies to make it work? And he said it would all work out in the end.
Last question on this topic, and then we're going to talk about fun stuff.
Okay.
Not that this, I love civics is fun.
This is kind of fun.
Is what is happening in Washington, D.C. with President Trump and Elon Musk and Dodge. Is it Doge, Spangle? You're connected to the Illuminati in Washington, D.C. Doge. Does that make it harder for you to message? AIM's a great organization. Terrific people work there. Super smart.
Absolutely.
But when you've got headline after headline and X message or social media message one after another saying, we found this, we found this, we found this, does it make it more difficult for you with your, 8-figure budget to message like, I get that they found $100 and some million in this agency, but you do understand that our budget is only X, and we just don't have that sort of fat in the Muncie City municipal budget.
Well, we can always find more. I just know I can't find $2.4 million. We cut $700,000 or $800,000 the first year, and we've kind of maintained that. We've done some salary increases as our tax revenues have gone up. I appreciate what's going on in Washington, and I think it's overdue. And so I'm supportive, but it does create a situation to where it's difficult. I mean, we try and do the best we can.
But the messaging gets tough.
It does.
Why can't you be like Trump, Mayor, and find the money everywhere? And you're like, that just doesn't exist.
Yeah.
I mean, we're dealing with snow removal.
That's right.
With parks, with fire, with police. The list goes on in Indianapolis. And Mayor Ballard was as I'd use the word parsimonious, but he was in the Marines. He wouldn't know what that meant. So I'll say cheap.
Okay.
As you get. And he still would get frustrated that he couldn't find the money not for some, $2 million piece of art, but I need more snowplows. I need better swimming pools, or the sort of grassroots amenities that people expect from their city. He would get frustrated when he couldn't find the money to do that. How do you say no to yourself as mayor?
Well, you just have to make the choice, and you hope that you have the relationship with the public that's strong enough that they understand that you're doing everything in your power. Some will, some do, and I get stopped a lot in the grocery stores and at restaurants and so forth, and they say, "Hey, thank you for what you're doing." And then on social media, I don't see as many positives. So you just have to have a belief that you're doing everything in your power and that your team is doing everything in their power. We put in a couple ordinances early on that required some beyond what the state rules were, that be on some bidding and quotes to make it even more challenging for somebody to spend even as low as $5,000 in a department. And it hinders things, but I do think it was the right thing to do.
You're listening to the Leaders and Legends podcast. Our guest today is Dan Ridenour. He is the mayor of Muncie, Indiana. We've been asking him all sorts of questions about government finance, which I know is riveting, although I have learned a few things. So we're going to move on and discuss, go back to some more questions about the mayor's life and his interests. Is there a particular Hoosier leader and or legend you admire most?
Well, if I could claim him, I would say Abraham Lincoln. He grew up here, so he's a Hoosier in my opinion. I know Illinois likes to claim him, but
how many listeners do we have in Kentucky, Spangle?
I know.
In Illinois. So, go ahead. I'm sorry,
but I think certainly have always been impressed with what he was able to accomplish. I've mentioned Mitch Daniels. I don't know that there's many people beyond his results throughout. I mean, I have my sister worked for Purdue, and I have several family who went to Purdue, and being from Frankfort in high school, we went to a lot of Purdue games. And to know that they did not have those increases because of his financial expertise, in my opinion, was a big part of it. That's always been really impressive to me.
My son was there at the time. We're very grateful to
I bet.
Mr. Daniels. And I'm lucky enough to be able to tell him more than once how grateful because very few things are as disheartening as reading about the cost of higher education.
Yes.
Do you have a special relationship with, let's say, the mayor of Bloomington or the mayor of Evansville or the mayor of Terre Haute, who also has, they have these universities that are right there in their city and close, so you have something in common with them? Is there like a group?
I would say no, there isn't. Uh, it's not that we don't have a relationship, but I know the new mayor of Evansville. I'm not very well acquainted with, but I did go spend some time with previous mayor um, who retired. Uh, and got some advice on river districts and liquor licenses and things along those lines, which we did not have in Muncie. I also went to South Bend and got some advice from them, and we put together that type of program. I think and I the mayor of Terre Haute, I think, has a lot of energy, and will be interesting to see what he can put together.
A true patriot, too.
Yeah, so that's right. That's right. So I see him all the time, but we don't seem to run in the same circles, so to speak, at AIM events.
Well, tell Greller to buy you both
I
lunch
know.
at the same
I
time.
know.
You talked a few minutes ago when we were discussing trails that you're a runner. What does
Yes.
running do for you?
Oh, it's where I clear my head. I spend a little. I will spend time with a prayer, but mostly I ponder. My wife calls it ponder. So I'll think about the day, what I'm trying to accomplish, what's been a struggle. I don't run with anybody. I run by myself, and I don't run with music. So I'm just outdoors, and really enjoy
So
it.
you can
Yes.
just hear everything?
And yes, I like to do it that way, and we have a great trail system in Muncie with the Cardinal Greenway and the White River Greenway.
How are your knees?
They're great.
You're
I didn't start
kidding.
running until I was 35.
What made you decide to do, and let me ask you, what is the, in my notes here, you are an Ironman 70.3 finisher? What does that mean?
That means I completed an Ironman. There's one held every year in Muncie. It's the longest continuous 70.3 in the continental United States. Hawaii has one that's longer, 1 year longer. But we host an Ironman every year. And it starts with a 1.2 mile swim, and then it's a 56-mile bike ride, and then a 13.1 mile half marathon. So a triathlon, 3 sports. And I did complete that. I've done several triathlons, but I've only done one of the full 70.3s. I like running.
You've completed
I
17 full marathons?
I have.
Don't you just get bored?
No.
Once I never ran.
I understand, though.
I never ran until I was in the military, in the Army.
Okay.
Then I ran every day for 3 years. Hated every part of it. I like to ride a bike, but didn't enjoy it. Said I will never run again. I was discharged in January of 1990. I've never run and refused to.
So
I just find it not stimulating, but I know so many people who enjoy it for the reasons besides the health.
Yeah.
That you mentioned. Paul Okeson, who's a great friend of the podcast, used to be chief of staff for Mayor Ballard, president of Garmon Construction now. He's an avid runner, and he says that's what he does. Yeah. It's his time to himself to think through how he's going to approach problems, deal with being a parent. The list goes on and on. Mm-hmm. But you never get bored?
No. I enjoy every minute of it. Every minute of it. Oh, maybe about 22 miles, you get to the point where you're thinking, okay, when's this going to be over? But at this point, I'm not running that kind of distance. So I ran 3 miles yesterday morning, and I'll run 3 miles tomorrow morning. And then I'll run 5 or 6 on Friday, and then we'll see how it goes on Saturday. I think the weather's going to be rather challenging. I do have a treadmill in the basement, but I prefer to run outside.
Sure.
If it's 10 degrees, I'll run outside.
Have you traveled to other cities, I'm assuming?
Yes.
Where's some of the marathon cities that you've hit?
I've done Chicago twice. It was my first marathon and my 10th. That's a great event for somebody to to participate in. I mean, you go by Wrigley Field and you go by the White Sox Stadium and so forth. So it's nice, and you've got the lake. Toronto was one of my favorites. I did the Toronto Marathon. If somebody is looking forward to, wants it to be flat, the Air Force Marathon at Wright-Patterson in Dayton, Ohio.
yeah.
That would be a great one. It's super flat, very well run. They know what they're doing on that one. If you like the hills, the Seven Bridges Marathon in Chattanooga is a good one. And my very last one ended at Tennessee Stadium. My wife's a Tennessee grad, so Knoxville. So I did Knoxville was my last marathon that I've done. I've done 44 halves.
I'm assuming you've done the
I've done the Muncie Mini, or the Indy Mini many times. I haven't done it in 6 or 7 years though, because I'm busy and I'm older, and so I train now for the Ironman.
New York or Boston? You hit either of those?
I didn't. I said I was going to, and I didn't accomplish it. But I'm pretty satisfied with where I've been and what I've done. But those are some of the cities that I've run in.
You are a 43-year season ticket holder for the Indiana Pacers. We've had several Indiana Pacer sports and entertainment folks on the podcast, including the late Jim Morris and Mel Raines and Bill Benner and Eddie White and David Benner and Rick Fuson. I can't think of anyone else. I think that's
quite a list.
We're very lucky.
Quite a list. Yeah,
we're very lucky to be sure. Oh, Boyle. Mark Boyle.
Oh, I bet that was interesting.
He's such a nice man.
Is he nice?
He was a wonderful guest. As someone, I don't particularly follow pro basketball or college. I kind of matriculated to football several years ago. It's just for whatever reason. But great memories, great people. It's a terrific organization. I hate to ask because I don't know the timeline right off the top of my head, but did you buy season tickets because of the marathon?
No.
Remember the ticket or the telethon? The telethon.
No, I remember that. I was a little too young at that point.
I think that may have been a year or two before you.
Yeah, my first year of season tickets was Clark Kellogg's rookie year. So 82.
And you really thought that Steve Stepanovich was going to bring us the... So as a season ticket holder, the Pacers have famously lost 3 coin flips.
Yeah,
4.
That would be true.
They lost out on Sampson for Stepanovich, lost out on Ewing for Wayman Tisdale.
Yep. And then
David Robinson, I think they lost.
Which might have been Rick Smits, but I don't know that. But Rick turned out really, really good.
Yeah.
But we've been through all of those, and just great years in the 90s and the early 2000s with Reggie. I remember all that, and now I'm to the point where I don't think I can't give them up. I've been told by some in the Pace organization that I may be the longest continual Pacer season ticket holder, and so
Really?
I don't think I want to give up on that, and I hope that before my end that we get an NBA championship. That we really had we had the best team I think in 99, but we just didn't believe it. A
lot of people say the year of the Malice and the Palace was the best team.
Well, that's true. I try and I still don't forgive Detroit for that, but
and I have said on this, let me disassociate myself with you very quickly on this. I have said multiple times on this podcast that I thought the players were justified. I thought it was awesome that they got attacked and went in and defended themselves.
They did.
And Bill Benner, wherever you are, thinks that's the craziest opinion of all my crazy opinions. But as a fan, and you were watching that happen, it happened in Detroit. It didn't happen here.
Correct.
What was your reaction? I hate to say it's the most famous or infamous incident in Pacers history, but It's got to be in the top 4 or 5.
It is. I was angry at the fans, and then my mind started shifting to, oh no, don't swing. Oh no. And then I'm thinking, what's going to happen? And then I remember with our tickets, they were of no value a few weeks after that because of all the suspensions. We were horrible and an embarrassment to the league, so to speak. And but we endured. We endured.
Do you have a favorite Pacers player not named Reggie Miller?
I would say not one that people would think. Byron Scott, because when Byron Scott came here,
Hit that shot against Orlando.
Yes, he had the experience that we lacked, the confidence that we lacked, and I really think he gelled the team together to help us get past those evil New York Knicks. I know it was Orlando as well, but I think Byron Scott really made a difference on the team. And I always
had rings from his time with Magic Johnson and the Lakers.
He sure did. And I always, just because of his consistency, there were two guys that were consistent, never superstars. Neither of them were ever all-stars. But Derek McKee was so dependable,
yes,
and so was Vern Fleming. So,
have you met any of the Pacers players, or had a chance? They have season ticket holder.
They have events. Yeah.
Were you at the game when Jordan came back?
I was.
Were you at the game when Miller hit the 3 over Jordan?
Yes.
Are those your favorite? Are those your memories?
Those are some great memories. My favorite Pacer memory of all time is it's actually the Byron Scott dunk. At the end against Orlando. It was against Orlando when we clearly were going to win this, but it was in that game.
Were you at the game where the Pacers were up 3-2 and lost at home to the Knicks in the playoffs?
Yeah.
The Spike Lee "I'm going to get killed" game that he talks about. He didn't think he was going to make it out of Market Square Arena alive. Yeah. Was it frustrating as a Pacers fan to have to deal with the Knicks and the league
and the Hicks
and the ref and the refs? Excuse me. Do you have that chip on your shoulder as a Pacers fan, or is that pretty much gone now?
Well, I suppose as I've aged, it's not there anymore. But I still remember the 4-point play on the no foul that was called in New York. He did not touch him, and but they got the 3-pointer and the shot and the free throw, and that was the game. But I also remember the 8 points and that Reggie scored and on TV. So it's a lot of great memories.
I hate to say this, and so it's 100% a compliment, but your temperature has risen considerably since we started talking about the Knicks, more so than for the property taxes.
Well, I will admit that I've heard about some of the amendments to SB 1, so I feel a little better about where that's going.
We've reached the point on the Leaders and Legends podcast where we ask the same 5 questions of all of our guests. Mayor Ridenour, are you ready?
I'm ready.
What was your first job?
Cutting lawns. And I cut grass for neighbors, including the mayor of Frankfort, Indiana. But I would lug that thing or that lawnmower behind my bike, grew it to where it had 22 different yards that I cut. Very entrepreneurial, I suppose. But,
what's the first big purchase you made when you wow, I've got money that I can buy what I want without asking my parents?
Well, so I'll qualify it. They did get a loan for me, but I put $1,000 down on a 72 Plymouth Satellite with an 8-track player, and it was great. I put Krager mags on them and had 70 series tires, and yep. But I paid it off before I left high school. So.
First 8-track you bought?
Yeah.
No, what was the first 8-track you bought?
Oh, I loved Rush, and I liked Boston.
So that would have been 76, I think is the first Boston album, 75, 76.
It was more than a feeling.
I can see why you're successful politically. Number 2, what was your first concert?
That would have been, I don't even want to say this.
Oh, we've had some wonderful ones.
So Mom took us, the four of us, to the state fair. So this was, I don't know if that even counts as a concert, but it was the Osmonds. Do I have to say that? The first one that I actually went to was Bachman Turner Overdrive.
Oh, right.
And it was in the what is now part of the convention center and eventually became part of the Hoosier Dome, but it was in that venue, and the backup, the leadoff band was Aerosmith. But BTO was the
headliner, and the opener was Aerosmith.
Aerosmith.
My brothers and my sister are about 7 to 10 years older than me, and they saw so many terrific bands in the convention center as opening acts.
Yes.
Bob Seger being one of them, Kiss being one of them, opening, I think, for Aerosmith. Question number 3. If you could recommend any book for someone to read, which book would you choose?
Yeah, I would say anything by Jim Rohn.
Sports?
No, Rohn.
Okay.
And he's long past gone. He's left us, but his books have had such an impact on me because he talked a lot about philosophy and how that creates your attitude, which creates your actions, which creates your character. And he's had a tremendous impact on me. His main philosophy is that success is doing little things, the right things, little things each and every day. And failure is often when you don't do the right things, and and that's what all his books were about. I know, The Four Seasons, I'm trying to think what some of his books were,
sure.
but Jim Rohn, Rohn, you can get him off of, I sometimes will view some of his old broadcasts on YouTube.
Does running in the morning give you that sense of accomplishment that you need to accomplish more things during the day?
It does, without question. Without question.
Number 4, if you could witness any event in history, be there in person as it happens, which event would you choose?
This is an event that has already occurred.
Correct.
Okay. Because if I could be at an event of anything, it would be the Pacers winning an NBA championship at home. But I can't make that happen. But I would be there if I were alive. Any event, and I should have been better prepared for this. I don't know.
We don't give the questions ahead of time.
Yeah, so
I want people to...
I didn't even think about something like that. What would I like to have been?
We like the thought process.
Yeah.
So there's no wrong answer. Popular answers are the crucifixion, the resurrection, the Sermon on the Mount, Declaration of Independence.
Yeah. I think
the
Declaration is good. I guess I'm still going to go back to Lincoln, and I'd love the Gettysburg Address. Just his portion, not the guy that spoke for 2 hours before him.
Not Edward Everett.
That's right.
Not Edward Everett, poor guy. Last question. Well, you get a bonus question, but 5th question: if you could have dinner with anyone living today, 2 hours off the record, living today, whom would you choose?
No, I think I'd pick Trump, President Trump.
You wouldn't get a word in.
That's probably true.
Last question. Do you know David Letterman, and can you get him on the podcast?
I know people who know him well, but I do not.
He's such a wonderful ambassador, though.
Yes, he is. Yes, he is.
Much like Larry Bird is for French Lick, but I mean, or Terre Haute, where he's.
Yeah.
Is he the guy, the celebrity you think that people most associate with Muncie, kind of Ball State?
I think so. Yeah. Yeah.
You have been listening to Leaders and Legends, a podcast sponsored by Veteran Strategies an Indianapolis-based public relations enterprise. Our guest today, Dan Ridenour. He runs. He's really good at math. He's a terrific advocate for Muncie, Indiana, serves as their mayor. I'm going to have to buy Mr. Organ lunch. I'm glad he suggested this. You are a wonderful guest. Thank you so much for your time and your perspective. Enjoy the Pacer game tonight.
Well, thank you so much. It's been my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you very much for listening to Leaders and Legends, brought to you by Veteran Strategies Incorporated. If you want to contact us about this program or our menu of public relations services, please send us an email at robert@veteranstrategies.com. That's robert@veteranstrategies.com.